Ladies and gentlemen, let's kick this thing off. The Honourable Curtis Pitt is Queensland's Treasurer and Minister for Trade and Investment. Mr Pitt has been a Member of Parliament since 2009, representing the far north Queensland seat of Mulgrave. He has previously served as Minister for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Partnerships, Minister for Sport, Minister for Employment and Industrial Relations, Minister for Disabilities, and was Queensland's first standalone Minister for Mental Health. Mr Pitt has dedicated his career to advocating on behalf of all regions in Queensland, and in his previous political life led Queensland Government's Business and Skilled Migration Program and was head of the Indigenous Jobs and Enterprise Task Force. Please welcome the Treasurer of Queensland, Curtis Pitt.
Thank you very much, Stephen, and thank you to all for coming along today. Can I start by acknowledging that we meet on the land of Aboriginal people and pay my respects to elders past and present. We're very fortunate in this country to have two of the world's oldest continuing living cultures in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, whose lands, winds and waters we all now share. Can I acknowledge the Queensland Media Club members and Media Club sponsors, and great to hear that there's been renewals for next year. Members of the Queensland Parliament Media Gallery, the Under-Treasurer, Jim Murphy, who I see here. Thank you for being here, Jim. The Honourable Terry McEnroe, the former Queensland Treasurer and man about town. We also have Shane Newman, the member for Blair federally, Milton Dick, the member for Oxley, Assistant Minister Jennifer Howard, member for Ipswich, and Jim Madden, the member for Ipswich West. So when I woke up this morning, I looked out the window and looked at the Brisbane city skyline, and the sun was coming up. And it was amazing. It was quite early. I saw the lights of the cars coming forward. People were driving to work already. And already there was this sense of busyness. And the first thought that came into my head was opportunity. Now, not just opportunity for the day ahead, but opportunity for the next few years and what's to come. And today is Queensland Day. Happy Queensland Day, everybody. Marking the anniversary of the establishment of the then colony of Queensland in 1859. On this day, we became a colony independent of New South Wales. Still the biggest mistake the Blues ever made. That includes losing 10 series of State of Origin out of the last 11. But after we separated from New South Wales and became a standalone state after the Federation, by world standards, we're still a young state. It was a state of opportunity then, and it remains so today. Queensland is filled with endless opportunities for our people and for our economy. Take a look back to January 2015 when we said there was a better way for Queensland. We said there was a better way to achieve growth, attract investment, to pay down debt, restore frontline services, and above all, a very important thing, to create jobs. In my first two budgets, I believe that that's been shown to be true. In 2015-16, I laid the foundation for our economic plan with that single-minded focus on creating jobs. Since then, we've taken the opportunities to revitalise our frontline services, in particular, the areas of health, education and training. We've made investments to deliver on our promise to grow the state economy. But our government's strong and disciplined fiscal management has also been there all the way along. The published outcomes of the 2015-16 report on state finances, our actuals, demonstrate that. And we were right to say that there was a better way. My first budget in 2015-16 delivered the largest operating surplus in a decade. Last year's budget continued to implement our election commitments, and it too delivered a surplus. It's important to note that in both of those budgets, we were forecast to deliver surpluses right across the forward estimates, and that was even before the recent spike in world coal prices and upward revisions of extra royalties. Our economic plan has been based on hard work, and the third budget I'll deliver next week is going to be no different. However, this year we need to recognise the huge financial impact on this year's budget of severe tropical cyclone Debbie and the related flood events. Many of you would know I come from cyclone country in far north Queensland, and I've experienced more cyclones than I would like to remember. People often ask when you go through a cyclone, what do you see? It often happens at night time, so that's been my experience, but of course they last a long time. But it's not so much what you see, it's what you hear and what you feel. You hear the sound of the emergency broadcaster on the radio, giving you instructions to remain safe. You hear the wind roaring like a freight train coming through, and you feel your house moving, shaking and swaying. And you often don't get to see anything until the next day. And that's the case after the cyclone itself from a government perspective. We do a lot of mobilising ahead of time, we do a lot of watching, and then we have to wait to see what the outcomes are. But what we have seen is widespread damage to people and to property. There'll be an estimated $1.1 billion impact on our budget's bottom line. 36 local communities were activated for natural disaster relief and recovery arrangements. More than 118,000 people have been provided assistance through the Personal Hardship Assistance Scheme. Just last week, Brigadier Chris Field handed over to the Queensland Reconstruction Authority. Under the NDRRA, the federal government will eventually pay some of the costs, but in the meantime, the state must carry that cost upfront and be reimbursed later. Challenges remain, but the extreme weather events will not deter us from our task. To restore frontline services, to support economic transition, and to demonstrate responsible management of the state's finances. My parents always taught me that in challenging times you have to also look for opportunity. And in the case of recovery and reconstruction works, and providing opportunities for local tradespeople and business people to help local businesses get back on their feet, there has to be a silver lining. Despite this significant hit to the state's balance sheet, it is still my aim to have the 2017-18 budget in surplus. In addition to the financial impact of Cyclone Debbie, it's also expected to have a negative impact in terms of our gross state product. Federal Treasurer Scott Morrison said in his recent CETA speech that the repercussions of Tropical Cyclone Debbie will have national consequences. And this I agree with him on. That's true that Queensland's economic performance is what prevented further decline in last year's national growth figures. Queensland's state final demand figures boosted the national outcome, while successive federal policies under Turnbull, Abbott have caused the national growth figure to be amongst the worst in 20 years. Without a real commitment from the federal government to building new infrastructure in Queensland and creating job creation in regional areas of our state, the federal government's undermining our economic potential as a state. And of course, we're very keen to see that change. The economic losses from Cyclone Debbie and associated floods are estimated to be more than $2 billion, including damage to individual properties, our infrastructure, impacts on exports, particularly coal and sugar. Over the past 2 years, Queensland has experienced strong growth, with a bounce back from the 0.8% growth in 2014-15 to 3.2% in 2015-16. It's anticipated that Tropical Cyclone Debbie could shave around 3/4 of a percentage point off GSP, mostly in the 2016-17 year, but losses will be spread across 2017-18 as well. But despite its impacts, Queensland Treasury is still forecasting strong growth going forward. If anything, Tropical Cyclone Debbie has reinforced and highlighted the resilience and the diversification that's within the Queensland economy. In October last year, Standard & Poor's rating agency confirmed our AA+ rating. It noted that upwards ratings pressure could occur with a potential return to AAA over the next 2 years on the successful implementation of our debt action plan and containment of expenditure growth, as we plan to continue to do. They noted the state's strong financial management has improved budgetary performance. Budgetary performance is now considered to be strong, which is significant improvement from the previous year when S&P identified the rating as being constrained by average budgetary performance. More recently, our strong fiscal management and disciplined approach saw Moody's reaffirm our AA1 rating, which is equivalent to AA+. Most significantly though, Moody's had placed us on a stable outlook after removing the negative outlook which had been imposed after the 2012 budget. Ratings agencies consider all aspects of our economic and fiscal management, including our debt action plan. At a time when the national credit rating has been placed on negative outlook and some other states and territories have been downgraded, retaining our rating and moving from a negative outlook to a stable outlook is a very significant achievement. Queensland businesses are setting export records, and our ports are a key part of that logistics chain, which sees valuable export income generated for our state. In the 2016 calendar year, we set a new record for merchandise exports of $53.7 billion, or more than $1 billion a week. It's estimated in Queensland that 1 in 5 jobs are supported by export, and that's why we developed a new $35 million trade and investment strategy. We've always been a trade state leading the nation, and we want to keep growing these export markets by engaging with the world, especially with the rising Asian middle class. While the growth that we've experienced in Queensland over the last couple of years has very much been led by exports, our economic plan has seen an upturn in our state's domestic economy. State final demand is a key measure of our domestic economy because, unlike GSP, it does not include our export and trade performance. The most recent state accounts for December show that state final demand was 1.6% higher than a year earlier. We've now seen positive growth in state final demand for 4 consecutive quarters, after 8 consecutive quarters of contraction. The figures showed that growth in the domestic economy was supported in part by major investment in infrastructure, a key part of our plan. It's our state's growth that is propping up the national growth figures, contrary to what we've heard some commentators say. Now, rebuilding confidence has also been something that we've talked a lot about. I refuse to be negative about our state. I believe we have great prospects. Almost from day one in office, we've engaged with the private sector and we're partnering with them to drive jobs growth and create more prosperous opportunities in Queensland. I've said on several occasions that you need to look at a range of surveys to get a handle as to how the economy is travelling and how business confidence is tracking. So it's encouraging to see that nearly all of the surveys are now saying pretty much the same thing. The NAB Quarterly Business Survey has ranked us highest or second highest on business confidence for 26 of the last 28 months. The latest Census Business Index for March quarter shows confidence amongst SMEs in Queensland as at its highest level in 7 years. It shows our economic plan is generating the right conditions for small to medium enterprises to start, to grow and to employ. The Census Index also shows Queensland businesses are now the most positive in the nation and about the long-term prospects of our economy. And the CCIQ Pulse Survey shows the best business conditions since 2009 and the highest confidence since December 2014. So what's interesting about these surveys, and notably the Courier Mail's recent Queensland Index in the QBM, is the uplift in sentiment in regional communities. Part of our economic plan has had a deliberate focus on regional economies to help them transition from the highs of mining construction. We've implemented a range of programs only available in regional Queensland. Last budget I announced a $100 million Back to Work program, which was about incentivising employers in regional Queensland to employ and retain someone for 12 months, $10,000 for anyone they employ, and $15,000 for a long-term unemployed person. At last year's MIFRA, I introduced a youth boost in the Back to Work program. This was to employ people aged between 15 and 24 years of age, to keep them for 12 months, and the incentive was $20,000. This direct employment scheme has so far seen almost 4,500 previously unemployed people get a job. There's an extra 900 applications from employers currently being processed. More than 4,000 unemployed regional Queenslanders, more than half of them youth unemployed, are working today as a direct result. We've implemented a $200 million Works for Queensland program, supporting minor capital works projects with councils right across Queensland, and particularly, of course, those in regional Queensland. We've implemented a $130 million Regional Jobs and Growth Fund to attract new investment and new industries, business expansions, growth and new jobs. This is in addition to our Building Our Regions program, our significant regional infrastructure program, and the $2 billion State Infrastructure Fund. Of course, we can't forget our Advanced Queensland strategy, which I'll talk a bit more to, and our $20 million Made in Queensland Fund. This regional focus is deliberate, as I said, and it's about creating jobs. We've lowered the statewide unemployment rate to 6.4% from 6.6%, but it has been stubborn. We've created, though, a net 59,200 jobs since the election. So jobs will come, they will go, but newly created jobs of nearly 60,000 has been a good outcome, but there's more work to do. From opposition, I was critical of the previous government for the impact that I knew that their massive cuts to jobs and services would create, particularly in regional Queensland. And I was also critical about some of the lack of infrastructure spending and focus. So when we came to office, we faced the end of that mining construction boom. The projects that weren't spent or announced in regional Queensland was always going to be an issue. And it seems that everyone else knew that this boom would end and there needed to be a transition plan in place. But coming into government, it is not easy to fill a gap that has been left after it's already there. And nowhere is this seen more sharply in focus than in Townsville, where the gap was exacerbated by the closure of Clive Palmer's Yabula nickel refinery, with more than 800 jobs lost and many more indirect flow-on effects as well. So our government announced a number of major projects, including the $250 million North Queensland Stadium we're building in partnership with the federal government. But these projects take time to execute and plan. So in the meantime, it's why programs like Back to Work have been so essential. While Townsville has suffered significant rises in unemployment, is now experiencing a fall from the peak. We've seen falls in the Mackay region from 8% in December 2015 down to 5.8% today. We've also seen falls in the unemployment rate in my hometown of Cairns, where it's down to 7.1%. This is the lowest it's been since September 2011. Despite these gains, general unemployment and youth unemployment, as I said, remains very stubborn, and particularly so in regional Queensland. And that's our challenge, is to ensure that we can get this growth story shared amongst as many people in Queensland as possible. The previous two state budgets focused on innovation, investment and infrastructure, all necessary elements for job creation and leveraging our more than $300 billion state economy. We've invested in the future through our Advanced Queensland agenda, working with local businesses and particularly exciting programs like Ignite Ideas. We've implemented programs to grow our regional economies and deliver jobs now and for the next generation of Queenslanders. Our $40 billion capital works program over 4 years is supporting job-creating infrastructure that we need for tomorrow. We've continued to restore those frontline services. We've seen the introduction of legislated nurse-to-patient ratios. We've seen the employing of additional nursing graduates and extra teachers. But we're also committed to fiscal discipline that underpins our management. We're working towards a sustainable public service figure in line with population growth on average over the forward estimates. And we've seen our reduction in general government debt almost meet our 10-year general government debt reduction target in only our first term. And all of these have been achieved without selling our assets, without massively raising taxes, without cutting services and jobs to Queenslanders. So next Tuesday's state budget is going to be continuing to fulfil our promise to Queenslanders, to create jobs, particularly in regional Queensland, to generate and promote the business conditions needed and the confidence needed for investment. We've already seen in the last state accounts 2 positive quarters for business investment after 11 negative quarters. So business investment is on the way back. Our previous budgets have improved frontline services, and of course what I say we're going to put money into the forward estimates, we'll put money into the forward estimates. We're going to talk about real projects with real money allocated to real projects in the forward estimates and not beyond the forward estimates. And it's important because I don't think people should expect that we'll do something in the last out year. Our next state budget is going to continue to help with household budgets. Last week we announced a considerable move to try to contain the recommended power price for regional households and regional businesses, having the recommended increases by the QCA. This was a major cost of living initiative. It's going to cost the budget $770 million over 3 years to back consumers and lower electricity prices from what they had recommended by the Queensland Competition Authority. This is part of our $1.16 billion Powering Queensland plan, which we launched yesterday. These actions in response to the QCA's determinations will reduce household bills in regional Queensland from 7.1% down to 3.3%. That's an ongoing estimated saving of $51 a year compared to the original QCA outcome. A typical small business will now see a much smaller increase, halved from the 8.2% down to 4.1%. That's a saving of around $90 a year. The fact is that businesses and households, they're being affected by what we think is a broken national system. The national electricity market was designed before the new technologies, before the opportunities to change the energy landscape, and the market needs to change to reflect this. In short, it's out of date. We should be the powerhouse of Australia. Queensland has abundant natural energy resources, both traditional and renewables, and energy utilities owned by the government. But of course, we believe that we're operating with one hand tied behind our backs. We can't wait for the national leadership to occur, so that's why we've announced our plan yesterday, to make sure that we're clearly stating that Queensland is here to help, we're here to power the nation, and we want to make sure that we can support, in the spirit of cooperative federalism, everyone in Australia. While we're going to keep pressuring the federal government to undertake the reforms needed, we're taking these steps to ensure that Queenslanders lead the way in terms of energy affordability, reliability and innovation. Before the last election, we had a very public promise to ensure that we kept our income generating assets owned by the people of Queensland. And never has this been more evident than now. Unlike other states, owning our energy assets has allowed us to make strategic nation-building decisions for the good of the state, and I'll talk to some of those in a moment. Through our Powering Queensland plan, we're ensuring that our government-owned corporations are delivering renewable energy infrastructure and energy security, which is about driving new investments in energy projects, particularly, again, in regional Queensland. The Powering North Queensland plan last week will alone unlock a wave of renewable energy projects to Far North Queensland's economy, expected to support around 5,000 jobs. Under the plan, there'll be a $150 million investment in Powerlink dividends to develop transmission infrastructure to support a clean energy hub. We'll be reinvesting $100 million of Stanwell's dividends to help the proposed hydroelectric power station at the Burdekin Falls Dam. Subject to feasibility investigations and other dam construction works, project construction could start from 2020 and support up to 200 jobs. We'll make a $100 million equity injection and reinvestment of dividends to upgrade the Burdekin Dam walls. And we'll be commissioning a hydroelectric study to assess options for deploying new hydro in the state, including North Queensland. We're about a hydroelectricity baseload future in North Queensland, not a new coal-fired power station. And the government's going to investigate the establishment of a new government-owned corporation, a clean energy company. The investigation will determine whether existing state-owned hydroelectric and gas generation assets, as well as the government's new renewable energy projects that have been announced in the budget, become the foundation of this new entity. There'll also be an investigation into the ability of such an entity to enhance competition in the wholesale market. And that's one of the key points. Right now, the levers that this government can control, those in terms of network, those in terms of distribution and retail, we're putting downward pressure on prices, but it's the wholesale market which is our biggest challenge. And that's where we need to work with the federal government. We believe, though, that the long-term market design for Queensland and the national electricity market will be having its work cut out for them, the Energy Task Force, the Energy Security Task Force that we announced. It's a very important group of people, we believe, who will be able to give us the evidence base that we need to get it changed to the national electricity market. But one of the issues we've asked it to examine has been the interconnections between New South Wales and Queensland. The Queensland-New South Wales interconnector has a southern flow capacity of approximately 1,200 megawatts and a northern flow of 700 megawatts. Over the past 5 years to 2016, Queensland has received electricity flows south and that revenue that came along with it. This represents a significant export market for Queensland and highlights the importance of this interconnector, and if it's in its best shape, we will continue to see greater reliability of supply, not experiencing load shedding like we've seen in other states, and we hope, again, we can show that we're the powerhouse of the nation. So any changes to the current links, and of course have to be done in regard with other jurisdictions, and that's something that the Premier will be talking about when she goes to COAG this Friday. So the GOCs, it's important to note that when we do say that we were going to retain them in public ownership, people have a very good expectation, and quite rightly, that they work more effectively and more efficiently than ever. So we said that these GOCs have to have a simple message. They have to perform for the people of Queensland. And people can expect that these should be having not just the interests of this corporate statement of corporate intent, but also to ensure that they are doing the right thing by the people they're here to serve, and that is Queenslanders. So what we're going to do is make sure that these dividends and these GOCs that produce them work for us. On Sunday, we announced that Stanwell Corporation's Swanbank E gas-fired power station will restart. And this is going to be increasing the supply and, of course, reducing the volatility that we've seen in the wholesale market, which we believe will lead to better outcomes, and particularly during times of peak demand. Of course, I announced that we'll also be directing Stanwell Corporation to adjust its bidding strategies in the national market. Now, it's important that the bidding behaviour of Stanwell is done in a commercial way, because they're still bound by the national rules. But of course, it doesn't let them off the hook in terms of the interests of Queenslanders. So we're asking them to take a more holistic view of pricing, and we're of course looking to ensure that they are pricing in terms of peak demand periods in a more fair and reasonable way. This strategy has already begun to show benefits to Queensland a day after it was announced. Queensland's electricity ASX futures price has already reduced. Next summer's contracts fell around 13% in a single day. This is just a start, and we look forward to more affordable and reliable electricity, and this wholesale challenge will remain. We are, of course, looking to make sure that these government-owned corporations are there to be not only a major source of investment into the regions, but of course directly employ people, and they employ around 5,000 Queenslanders. None of these actions would be possible if they were in private hands. If these electricity assets had been in private ownership, not government control, Queenslanders would likely be facing far higher prices, less choice, energy shortages and blackouts. So, in short, These are the sorts of things that we have to consider. We have to be part of the national debate. We have to lead the national debate. And that's why energy is such an important thing. I look around the room and see people from various sized businesses and people from industry, and I can tell that electricity is one of the key things that's playing on your mind in terms of your viability of the business, and it affects your investment decisions. That's why we believe this is an important piece of work. Today we had another example of our government-owned corporations remaining in public hands, being able to return dividends back to the people of Townsville. We've announced $75 million to progress the Townsville Channel Widening Project, boosting trade and jobs in Queensland, in the north, through the city deal with the federal government and the Townsville City Council. This channel widening project will allow larger vessels access to the Port of Townsville. Widening the sea channels will ensure that the Port of Townsville remains a competitive trade hub for Northern Australia, and we know that it's going to continue to provide more job opportunities. Now, to help boost economic growth and potentially our exports too, I'm planning on a targeted campaign to attract businesses and individuals to our state. Now, everyone in this room knows, and particularly here on Queensland Day, that Queensland is the best state in Australia. And we believe that people really need to know that if they don't already know. So we're going to be telling them that. We're going to be as parochial as we can be, and we're going to be asking them businesses to come here and invest, and we're going to be asking people to move here and bring their families with them. So today I'm pleased to launch Queensland, Endless Opportunities. This is a new investment prospectus for Queensland. Now this is essentially Queensland's calling card, both interstate and also overseas, a way of explaining the exceptional business advantages to people who may be thinking about investing in opportunities on offer in Queensland. It'll also be supporting commentaries from those people who are already doing business here or those who have already made the move. Last year, the Financial Times ranked Brisbane 4th out of all cities in the world for its foreign direct investment strategy. The ABS figures show that Brisbane is the most popular capital city destination for internal migration, showing its highest numbers in a decade as part of the result of housing affordability. We offer a pro-business environment. We help investors find the right opportunities, and we want to reduce the time and cost of investing. So, in short, we want people to move here, we want businesses to move here, and in both cases, they don't just mean moving to Brisbane. We believe regional Queensland has a lot to offer, and we believe that Northern Australia still has an enormous amount of untapped economic potential. So we'll be pushing all parts of the state, all of the various selling points that they have, and of course we encourage you to grab a copy of that prospectus, which will be available for you today on your way out. All states and territories, including Queensland, are in the market to attract new businesses and new residents. I can't launch the campaign today, but I will be saying that it will be one that stands out. Look, in conclusion, there's been another major announcement today, and of course that is that the Adani Group have announced their final investment decision for the Carmichael mine. The government welcomes this decision, and we welcome the investment and the confidence that they've shown in our state. We've already announced our new royalties framework that will apply to this project, and of course it's broader than one company, it's broader than one region. The new framework that we've developed is about expanding the Galilee Basin, the Surat Basin, and the Northwest Minerals Province. And it's not just in coal, it is in gas, it is in rare earth, it's in minerals and metals. It is important for us to look at these extractive resources and use them as our springboard to transition to a renewable future. We believe it's a responsible thing to do, and we believe we can get that balance right. But the Adani project will help further growth in our state, deliver jobs in regional communities, and of course, none of the investment decisions by Adani are factored into the budget that I'll hand down next week. So, of course, royalties will be some way off before the mine starts production. What we will, of course, see is increased economic activity and increased revenues to the state from payroll tax and other revenues. And that's an exciting thing. I'm pleased with the budget, the way it's been put together. I'll be even more pleased when we can start factoring in some of the additional uptick in economic activity that we'll see, particularly in regional Queensland. So I can't say much more about next week's state budget. I'm sorry, Barton, your promise is hollow. I will not be able to do that, even with Chatham House rules. But look, I will say that it will be a continuation of the approach that we've taken since coming into government. It has been methodical, it has been steady, it has been recognising that you have to get the balance right between driving the economy and being very much in control and disciplined about your fiscal management. So we're committed to including people in that growth story. We're committed to ensuring that we continue to see an improvement in business confidence and business conditions, strengthening economic growth and providing the conditions where people will make investment decisions that will stick. As I said before, we won't slacken or shift from our focus on job creation. The Premier has been very clear that her mantra is jobs, jobs, jobs. And to see nearly 60,000 net new jobs created in the state since coming to office says she means what she says. Of course, the budget will be framed in the accordance with the deliberate approach that we've taken in the last two. I can say that we will continue that hard work. We believe that Queensland offers massive opportunities. And I go full circle to my opening remarks. When I look out across the Brisbane skyline, or I go and wake up in a regional Queensland community, I see people going about their day and they can see they're hard-working people who just want a chance to do their job and to bring something home for their families. It's a pretty simple mantra, but that's what we believe that we need to do. So when we look at the economy in a macro sense, we're always thinking very micro about households and about how we can help people. Our economic plan, I think, and the positive agenda that goes with it, have been the hallmark of the Palaszczuk government. So we believe that not only was there a better way, but we believe the best is yet to come. We appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today as a broader government, but from my perspective, I appreciate you turning out. I'm very much looking forward to handing down my third budget. I'm proud of what we've done, and I look forward to sharing it with all of you. Thanks very much.
Okay, so Adani's announced its coal mine going ahead. A mayor's resigned wearing polka dot pyjamas. I think you've got to give us a bit more, don't you?
You know, they always say that you could try to time your announcements to be, in your favour. What you can't control is what other announcements happen on the same day and when the convergence of all of these things happens. But look, in short, we're really pleased to see the announcement by the Adani Group. And it has been a 6-year journey, one that we've been on for a couple of years. We believe it's a good outcome, which is going to get good results for Queenslanders.
Well, given Jim's got time for lunch, it must all be wrapped up. So there must be something more you can give us. Operating surplus wise, you've likely taken a hit because of Cyclone Debbie. I think you used a figure there of 1.1 billion.
Yep. Yeah. So we've early estimates had looked at a similar type of size weather event. So we were looking at Tropical Cyclone Osborne as that earlier event. What we've now got is, of course, more detailed information from the Queensland Reconstruction Authority. So we believe that we're pretty much on the money with that sort of an estimate. It's going to be a very, very large item in the budget. But look, you're not just talking about rebuilding, buildings, rail, bridges, those things. You're talking about rebuilding communities, and there's a lot of emotional hurt that's actually gone on in regional Queensland. So we've got to make sure that people feel like they're being helped and make sure that they can get on with it.
Yeah, I heard regional Queensland mentioned a lot there, and that's obviously a theme of the government. But you also mentioned figures about migration and how Brisbane is attracting a huge kind of number of people. Cross River Rail has been a project that's been on the government's books for 10 years. It hasn't progressed. Obviously, there's a bit of a stalemate with the Turnbull government. They're not going to throw you any cash with an election looming. Are you open to the idea of debt funding this project in some way to finally get it off the ground?
Look, I think there's still opportunities between now and next week, frankly, for the Turnbull government to have a very close look at what they can do. We'll be dogging them every day, quite frankly. We believe we've got a great business case. This is more than a public transport rail infrastructure project. It is a city-shaping project which will, off the back of what's happening with Queen's Wharf, will provide absolute certainty and security for construction work in the city and all of the things that are associated with that. So it's going to give us a massive body of work. So there are so many reasons why they should support it. What I was concerned about in the federal budget, and it's important I say this is why I believe that we could have some money coming, but I'm not holding out for it.
It was holding out for it. There's an option to debt fund it.
There was a $600 million investment by the Turnbull government in the federal budget, which had $600 million in the last 2 years of the forward estimates. And then there's apparently $9.4 billion outside of that. There's a chance that they can still come to the party and provide some dollars. we've taken a really close look at this. We've already put a $800 million down payment in last budget. So we have a very close look at what's possible. But I know in between now and then, the Deputy Premier is going to be down in Sydney trying to talk to her federal counterparts. The Premier is going to be at COAG making sure that Malcolm Turnbull knows we're not going anywhere and we want their support.
Now I'm hogging the mic a bit here, so I'll switch over to some of my colleagues in the media.
Treasurer Tegan George from Channel 10.
Hi Tegan, I can hear you, I can't see you.
Oh, hello. Just on the Adani royalties deal, over the last 2 weeks we saw quite a number of internal disputes made public in a way we haven't seen before. I'd like to know your opinion on that and how damaging you think that was to your government, especially in North Queensland.
Look, I think it's very sad. We saw a lot of conjecture, a lot of speculation, and no disrespect to yourself and others in the media, but sometimes those things are based on nothing more than speculation. But what I know is that I'm a member of Cabinet. This is the second Cabinet I've been a part of, and people get around the decision-making table and they make decisions. When that process is interrupted in any way, it means that the natural progression of that decision-making doesn't happen. So am I disappointed that there was, I guess, the cart being put before the horse? Absolutely. But what we've been able to do is reassure the Adani Group that our commitments in terms of the approvals we provided, the environmental safeguards we've put in place, and now with the royalties framework that we've got together, it's the reason why you've seen their final investment decision announced today.
Treasurer Chris O'Brien from the ABC, when you said those stories are based on speculation, Mark Ludlow looked really angry, so just get ready for his question.
I always look forward to questions from Mark.
My question is back on Cross River Rail. You just said a few minutes ago that there's still a chance between now and next week for something. Are you thinking specifically? Are you giving...
No, I'm speculating, Chris.
Only speculating. What is that based on, Treasurer?
Look, we're going to be applying pressure right up until budget day to the federal government. And look, why I say that is there's been some decisions made in the last two budgets which have seen an enormous amount of money in the hundreds of millions of dollars going to Melbourne, and there's been, in the most recent budget, more than $800 million going to the Perth Metrolink, off very flimsy business cases, can I say, where we've got a very, very good, solid case that Infrastructure Australia have had for 12 months. Look, we're going to continue to put the screws on. It's not something we're going to walk away from. I have formulated our plan, but I'm going to continue to ask, as will the Deputy Premier, as will the Premier. We want this to happen.
But I guess within the next week is very specific. I'm asking, do you really think that, or are you just saying that for lunch?
No, I guess the time frame of a week is because my budget's being handed down. We will make a call next Tuesday as to what's going to happen. But to say that I'm absolutely disappointed in the response federally, there's no other reason that I can say except essentially being frozen out of federal funding for not receiving any kind of an allocation to date.
And could I ask you just a technical question about the whole project? Do you need the entire project to be funded, on paper at least, before you can start?
Well, I think it's important that the funding for the project has to be clearly outlined, that it can be paid for from the get-go. It doesn't mean that there's not any opportunity for contributions to come from the federal government or to look at any other sort of financing options. The point is the market needs to know that it's happening. The federal government needs to know that our commitment is real. We thought we clearly outlined that last year in the budget. We may have to provide them with a reminder.
Treasurer Jeff Egan from News Regional. You've spoken a fair bit today about unemployment and what you've done to address this in regional Queensland. There was a focus in previous budgets. What's going to change about that in this budget that's going to improve the job situation for people in areas like the Wide Bay or places like Oakey, where the the New Hope mine is now has a question mark over its head?
So, I think what you need to look at is what's happened each year since each of the budgets have been handed down and what the economic conditions have looked like. It's been a constant process of improvement. Where we'd seen confidence being up and down in particular parts of the state, seen a much bigger gap between regional Queensland and southeast Queensland. A lot of those indicators are starting to converge. Look, I talked about the unemployment rate in Mackay. Both in Mackay and the Fitzroy region around Rockhampton, we're now starting to see what had been much higher regional unemployment rates converging with the statewide rate. And that's really the answer that we need to see. We want to see the state rate down, clearly, but when you start not having to have a big differentiation between regional Queensland policy settings and what's happening in the southeast, that's when we've started to actually see the economy moving forward as one. We, as I said, have a very, very strong economic growth story. Ironically, the exports that are happening are particularly exports from regional Queensland, but a lot of the throughput and jobs that come at the end piece have been still based in the southeast. So that's why that domestic economy piece is so important. When you start seeing the non-export related parts of the state improving, as we've seen for nearly a year now, it means that the settings that we put in place at large budget have made a difference. And of course, I can't tell you today what all of our announcements are going to be next week, but we hope that we're going to have the sorts of projects and programs which are going to continue to see that growth supported.
Treasurer Mark Ludlow from the Fin Review. I'm not that angry. Well, not at the moment. Look, obviously, you know, the big story for today, apart from the Ipswich Mayor doing a press conference in his pyjamas, was the Adani finally giving the green light to the Carmichael mine. It's been a long time coming for a lot of people in the industry and the government. They've made FID, but there's still about a $2.5 billion US funding shortfall. First question, do you believe that they'll be able to find that given the campaign against banks lending to new coal projects? And secondly, obviously, if the Adani project goes ahead, there's potential for other projects in the Galilee Basin. Have you, as the government, started negotiations with other players in the Galilee Basin, such as GVK Hancock Coal?
Well, Mark, as a reporter from the Australian Financial Review, you know I won't talk about matters of the commercial in confidence, but I will say that it's very, very clearly understood there are a number of proponents interested in not only the Galilee Basin but in other parts of the state. The reason we've developed this new framework was to try to look at first mover advantage to ensure that common user infrastructure is being built and provided, and that's one of the discussions that we've had with the Adani Group. You know, the rail capacity there will exceed the capacity that they require for their project, and that's because there will be the opportunity for other proponents to come on and use that infrastructure. In a similar way, we'll be looking at opportunities in the Surat, and we'll be looking at that in the North West Minerals Province. To your point about whether they will get all of the funding required to deliver the project, well, there's clearly a process that the Adani Group are going through with the federal government in regards to the Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility. That process, as we hear publicly, has very strong support by the federal government. We encourage them to get on with the job of putting money at the door under their facility.
Treasurer Sarah Elks from The Australian. The most contentious element of last year's budget was your $4 billion repatriation of funds from the surplus of the Public Servants Defined Benefit Fund. Yep. Are you planning on repatriating more this time around? And is it frustrating to you that your colleague, the Infrastructure Minister, has underspent from the $2 billion infrastructure fund on estimates from the last budget of what was supposed to be outlaid in this financial year?
So, look, you're quite correct. Last budget, there was a fair bit of controversy about this move. The reason it was controversial is because no one had ever attempted to do it before. Our fully funded liabilities as a state is one of the hallmarks of the Queensland government, no matter which side of politics is in. So it's something we've jealously guarded, and it's the envy of a lot of other states. What we did was we took advice. Of course, we did undertake the repatriation. We've since had a report from the State Actuary to say that process is underway, it's happening, it can continue, and there's no red flags, which says that we made the right decision. In terms of some of the funding that went towards, some of it went to debt reduction, and some went to an allocation into our State Infrastructure Fund. I think you will find that there has been a good amount of spending out of that State Infrastructure Fund. Of course, since the last updates, there have been additional projects and things put out there, including our Works for Queensland program, which the Deputy Premier has overseen, which has been very well received by local councils right across regional Queensland.
Felicity Caldwell from Brisbane Times. You've described this as a jobs budget, and I think Minister Mark Bailey called it a jobs bonanza budget. What does that actually mean? Is there an unemployment rate that you're going to be targeting?
No. Look, I try not to use words like bonanza too much myself, but I'm a little bit more conservative than some. Look, we're really strident on this job creation picture. It is the single most important issue for anyone, wherever they live in Queensland. So what you should expect to see are projects which will, we think, create direct jobs, ones that will, again, give local communities the confidence that investments are happening in their region, which will then in turn spur on more investment and more opportunities for other job creation. Look, we really believe that this is an important budget, and I'm not saying that because it's the last budget before an election. Clearly on that political front, it is important. I'm saying it because of the response I gave earlier. We have very good momentum in Queensland. We've seen each of the last 2 years the economic performance of the state improving from what had been a pretty subdued period. It's very important that we keep that going. That's the role of government, and we don't do all of it. We've got to try and make some of those critical decisions, put the markers in place and provide the business conditions to ensure that the private sector have the faith and confidence in not only the government but the broader economy we're operating in. And I reckon the budget's going to deliver that.
So 6%?
Sorry,
Do we hear 5.5%?
No, I wasn't trying to dodge that. I actually forgot. No, look, I've been clear in the past. We've not put a jobs target in place. What we've said is that there are, you can come up with a jobs target like the previous government did, and frankly, it was a very ambitious target. I think they talked about...
a stretch target, wasn't it?
Well, it ended up being a stretch target, but it was a 4% target over 6 years, which, by rights should have seen it at about 5% at the election, and it was at 6.6%. Look, we rely on the Treasury to provide us with their estimates about market conditions, a range of things, including wages growth and other expenses. There's a lot of factors that will come into play. But when you look at the job creation that we've seen in the state since the election, we're pleased with that, but we can see there's a lot more to do. Full employment, is about 5%. We're quite a way off that, but we believe that we're on the right pathway. And with some of the recent announcements that we've seen over the last week, which all have direct jobs associated with them, and some of the others which we think are going to provide a boost to confidence, we hope that we're going to see some significant outcomes.
Treasurer Stuart Late from AAP. We're seeing a lot of talk from your government about renewable energy, and obviously yesterday you recommitted to the 50% renewable target by 2030. Is there a contradiction, both politically and economically, with talking up renewables while also we hear the announcement today about Adani and a large coal mine and open up the Galilee for coal expansion?
Stuart, I don't think there is a contradiction. I believe that we have already got coal-fired power stations that we operate as a government. We're drawing a line in the sand in terms of not wanting to build a new one, and that's in contrast to what the federal government's saying that we need for North Queensland baseload power. In terms of what we do with old energy and old resources, you don't turn the switch off today, you've got to transition. That's why our plan includes a significant amount of domestic quarantined gas tenement to ensure that we get gas as a very important part of that mix. We believe it is the most important transitional energy resource to be able to get us through to that renewable targets that we talk of. Importantly though, we've got a lot of things that have still got to happen with the national market. Again, making sure we can put that renewable energy mix that we've already got and make sure that it can form part of our reliable baseload power as well. So we believe that it's a transitional approach. It's not something that happens this year or next year. Look, these statements that have been made about the considerable volume of coal that's going to go for the Adani mine, that is the biggest customer for that mine is the Indian government with their approach to trying to support growth in the Indian economy. Can I say that trade is a very important thing. It makes the world go round. We believe that their investment here will help India become an even bigger player on the global scale. And we believe that that will in turn come back to us. A good example is the interest from Adani Agribusiness, a separate group from the resources people, which is looking at making significant investments into chickpeas in Queensland. We currently produce around 600,000 tonnes of chickpeas, and it's really important for that vegetarian component of the Indian community, who of course need to have that protein. They would need Queensland to double its production of chickpeas in order to support what they need. And that is another opportunity, and again, not suggesting it's directly linked to these decisions, but what I am saying is there are going to be a lot of those things that will come back because of the kind of world and global outlook that we have as a state.
Treasurer, Sarah Vogler from the Courier Mail. We had a Reach Tell poll on the weekend that showed Labor in quite a bit of trouble in North Queensland. As a North Queensland MP whose seat was once held by One Nation, how worried are you about holding on, and what's Labor doing wrong up there?
I think, look, you're going to hear a very famous answer here is the only poll that counts is an election day. And look, I mean that because I don't actually do my job based on polls. I got asked a question recently about what one of the business groups' response to or a lack of awareness of some of the things that we were offering as a state government. And I said, well, my job's to get out there and sell those incentives and those programs better. But ultimately, my job is to ensure that the economy is as well positioned as it can be. And that's my job as the Treasurer. It's not my job as a politician. As a local MP, I'm born and bred in Far North Queensland. And I believe I'll stake my credentials against any candidates who come towards me. I think we're doing some very positive things in regional Queensland, and as you've seen this week, key areas like Townsville have seen a significant investment by our government, and we're also seeing now with today's announcement by the Adani Group a significant private sector investment going through that region. The more of those things we see, I think people will be a lot more confident about their own household situation and their prospects in terms of getting into work if they're not already employed.
I think that just about wraps us up. Please thank the Treasurer, Curtis Pitt.
Thanks, mate.